So, hello Harry, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic as always. Where the hell have you been? It's been so long, honestly, I've missed you.
Yeah, it's been a minute. Just other projects, working, prioritizing being a
hmm
dad, being a fiance. Um, just
hmm
other projects, mate. It's been fun, keeping
Yeah,
busy.
that's fair enough.
So, in fairness,
Yeah, that's
actually,
good.
that brings me to a question I want to ask you, which is obviously you know specifically what I've been doing the last kind of month, 6 weeks, whatever it's been. Which is at one point I put myself for a challenge where for a month straight I worked 19-hour days, and I mean
hmm
literally 19-hour days. I would leave for work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd finish that job at 5 p.m. At 6 p.m., I'd start a second job and I'd work from that until 2, 3 in the morning, get home an hour later, sleep for a couple hours, eat, up the next day at 7 and repeat. And I did that, let's say 6 days a week for an entire month every day. So, what I wanted to ask you was from an outside perspective, because obviously we talk at least every week, but you don't we don't see each other every single day. So have you seen from an
hmm
outside perspective any benefits to this, or did you see any changes? I'm curious.
Mm. Okay, so I know most people they're gonna look at that schedule and they're gonna say you're fucking crazy, like they just will. I personally, I think if you can do it, then I think everybody should do it once. Is kind of my kind of mantra on that because it teaches you what you're capable of, which I think is what you've kind of learned through that as well. But in terms of the what positive benefits have I seen, I think number one is like I just said, you've learned what you're capable of. You've learned that you can be resilient and are resilient, and I would assume anyway, in the future, if you feel a little bit ill or you don't feel like doing work that day or you're not getting results you want immediately, I think you're going to be that bit more resilient. Like you already were resilient, but I think now, it's an extra couple of months of resilience you've got, or, an extra and a bigger obstacle that you can kind of then overcome. Secondly, obviously we saw one another, when was it? A few weeks ago now, maybe a bit less than that. I can't remember exactly. But you'd lost obviously a lot of weight, which well done to you, fantastic. Well, actually, no, sorry, you hadn't lost weight. You'd slimmed off, but you'd actually put on weight. So that means you're obviously getting then in shape mentally and now physically. So that's kind of the second benefit. Um, I think the important thing to remember is the reason why people would call what you did crazy is because they've been told that a healthy work routine is always working 9 to 5, and then you have all of that time, the rest of that time off doing nothing, relaxing, watching TV. Now, this might be true for most people, but I think the important thing to remember is everybody has a different healthy work schedule. Same with everybody has a slightly different workout routine that works best for them. Everybody has a slightly different diet plan that works best for them. So for you, it may be that actually working 14 hours a day is a healthier work routine for you. It may not be, it may be. But I think the important thing you need to do is try everything. So try doing what you did and working insane hours every day. Um, Try working just 4 hours a day of really hyper focused work and then figure out which kind of work schedule is best for you. So I think that's another benefit that you must have experienced is figuring out, well, not only can you work more if you want to, but is that kind of work schedule right for you? So I'm curious to then hear your verdict. Is working that much what you want to do, or have you kind of now realized you do need a bit more balance because of obviously having a child and obviously for your fiance, etc.? Like, what kind of have you discovered?
Um, what I've discovered essentially is what I went in trying to prove almost, which is I do think that a lot of us have a lot more resilience than we're aware of.
Yeah.
Like the way I looked at it was very much kind of like from an evolutionary standpoint, which is I've got grandparents, great grandparents who fought in wars, who survived kind of some of the horrors of the 19th and the 20th centuries in different parts of the
Yeah.
world. And prior to that, all of our ancestors survived lions and bears and wolves and wild boar and warring tribes and everything. So for all of human history, we've
hmm
dealt with really difficult, extreme circumstance, lack of sleep, no food, just physically pushing yourself to the limit day after day after day, kind of getting blisters, calluses, bleeding, having headaches, and just having to carry on. So my logic was very much a case of, I don't think there's anything impressive about this. I think this is almost more natural for us, historically speaking, than the kind of lifestyle we live now. So I went in kind of, the way I was kind of telling my brother about it was, there's Viking DNA that he and I have. So I was saying, like, I'm trying to unlock that program, that gene in there that's Viking, trying to like get that to click into place, switch on, actually activate the turbo. In terms of me personally, my balance, what I've learned is, 19, 20-hour days working. That's fine. It's doable. You can survive it. I don't know from a long-term standpoint how well it would have worked. I did a month, and it was, the first week was the hardest. Week 2, week 3 was easier. Week 4 was the easiest by far. But that could have been, I knew that it was winding down, so the motivation was easier. And yeah, I found that the work schedule was fine. It's absolutely doable. You adapt really quickly, you get used to it, but it's just not worth it. I enjoyed the work, don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing or slagging anybody off. I really enjoyed the work, but I far more enjoy spending my time with my boy and my missus and family and just enjoying life that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, so on that note then, would you recommend that to people? If you had an 18-year-old who came up to you, say somebody wanted mentorship, would you say, find something and push your body to the limit, function on 3 hours sleep a day for 4 weeks in a row, function on 1 meal a day for 3 weeks in a row? Would you recommend it to somebody, or would you say, no, Harry's insane, don't do that? Just because he's done it, just because David Goggins has gone and done his crazy psycho marathons, doesn't mean anyone else should attempt it. Because God knows I'm not trying that shit. That's next level.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to match David Goggins. I know I have no intention to, obviously, let alone
that's
can
far too
I.
much cardio for me anyway.
Can't
Not
stand
built
it.
for
Yeah.
cardio.
Okay, so I think it depends on the situation. Now, if we assume most 18-year-olds aren't going to have a kid, and most 18-year-olds, obviously not all of them, but most 18-year-olds probably will be single, I think it can be very beneficial to do that while you have that energy, because at the end of the day, if you do that for a month, it's a month. By the end of the next month, there will be not a doctor, but I would assume there would be no negative consequences of that. Especially when you're 18, your body can obviously regenerate faster. You can get back to full health if it does make you
Let's
ill.
jump in really quickly there and just make that disclaimer. If you do decide to attempt any of
I'm
this,
not a doctor.
speak to your doctor first, because God knows me and
Yes.
Jordan are not the perfect examples of health. So please don't emulate us as having medical advice for you. It's not what you want to do.
Yeah. This is not medical advice. This is just us telling you what we have done or will do.
Purely
or could
anecdotally.
do. Purely anecdotally, yeah. Okay, so yeah, do I recommend it? Again, not as a doctor. Yes, because again, I think it can teach you that resilience. And worst case, if you're really, really, really struggling and it is making you ill, you can just stop doing it. You can just finish the month early if it is making you ill, and then obviously, like I said, you can just then recover. Now, again, obviously, there are certain situations where I wouldn't recommend it. For example, if you had some sort of illness that meant that you couldn't, or like if you had a child, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Just because you obviously want to be like at the top of your game. Again, I know you're a bit of a psycho, so you do you. But especially for like an 18-year-old, obviously I wouldn't recommend that, because we can kind of assume they've just become parents. But for most people, other than the few I've mentioned, I would say, yeah, give it a go, try it. I'm going to be trying it actually in the next week onwards. Not to the same extreme as Harry, don't get me wrong. I'm not quite as Viking as Harry, but I'm going to be working like basically throughout the entire day. So it'll be like 12 pushing 14 some days. So yeah, again, nowhere near on the same level as Harry, but I think it's important to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So even if you don't want to go straight to the extreme of Harry, or even worse to David Goggins, you can just start with something small. So, what would make you uncomfortable? Maybe it's waking up an hour earlier from bed. Maybe it's getting a cold shower. Maybe it's forcing yourself to record video content when you get up. So, like, you shower and get up, but record video content every single day. Whatever it is, just push yourself incrementally, so then you can sort of layer them on top of one another. And then in no time, you're working a much, much longer, harder work schedule, really pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And at the same time, you're learning all these skills, you're doing all this work, ideally towards making some money as well, so you can live on this. But equally, if you've got like a student loan, you don't necessarily need that. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the big thing I'd point out that you've said as well, just to reiterate it, is it's all about making it voluntary. The way I see it is it's almost like preparing a martial art or self defense or anything like that. It's the mental side of that, which is you're far better off in a controlled environment when you don't need to do it to practice it and to get the reps in,
yeah,
rather than
yeah,
be thrown into the deep end where, say, for example, you, God forbid, you end up as a single mother or something and you need to work 3 jobs and look after a child just to support yourself, and then you're stuck because then you've got no preparation time, you're fucked.
yeah.
It's the same as, like, you don't want to be in a situation where you've never lifted a weight before and now you physically need to lift a weight or somebody's going to die.
You've got to lift weight. Yeah,
You want to be in a situation where
yeah.
you're not going to rip a muscle just because you've never done a squat before or whatever. So I think it's the same mentally, which is just every now and again
Yeah.
get yourself out of your comfort zone just to
Be
so you're
prepared.
used to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I absolutely agree. It is definitely, obviously, it's far safer to learn something and build up mental toughness in a situation where, like I said, you can just finish that month early if it really is getting to you. Um, but I mean, that's kind of the same reason I know we both want to slash are learning martial arts. It's the same reason I want to learn how to use a gun and fire a gun safely, because it's this thing, like, you need to be, if you're ever in a situation where you need to use a gun, or you need to use martial arts and defend yourself or somebody else, or like you said, if you're a single mother and you need to be operating on 3 hours sleep or less for most people, and work 2, 3 jobs just to sustain your life, then yeah, it definitely helps to have that controlled environment beforehand. Okay, cool. I'll move on to the next topic then, and this is somewhat controversial, but I don't know if you've seen in the news recently about the trans woman, the weightlifter Laurel Hubbard. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I don't pay attention to the news.
No.
So
Okay. Cool. 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 I'll read you an extract from an article I read about this so that we're kind of both up to speed. So, the weightlifter, Laurel Hubbard, again a trans woman, will be the first trans athlete to compete at the Olympics. They transitioned back in 2012, and Hubbard, who lived as a male for 35 years, did not compete in international weightlifting until transitioning. Since then, however, she has won several elite titles. It has meant that the 21-year-old Tongan weightlifter, I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, so apologies, Kuinini Manamua, who would have otherwise qualified, has missed out on the Olympics. It's created a massive divide in opinion about whether this should be allowed or not. So, my first question is, what are your thoughts on this? Should trans athletes be allowed to compete in women's
so
sports in
first
this
pod
way?
back, and you're going to get me cancelled. Cheers for that. Um, my thoughts on it are, and I want to be very clear that I don't get kind of misunderstood or misrepresented here. I always get concerned when you're giving people, when you're giving people incentives and you're playing into people's motivations. I don't know anything about the specific case, so I absolutely believe that, I'm happy to accept at the very least that Hubbard is legitimate in feels then that they're in the wrong body, transition for the right reasons, etc. And wish them their happiest and healthiest of lives possible. The concern I have is if Hubbard goes on and she wins, let's say she gets the Olympic gold medal, gets a load of press and endorsements and all these kind of commercials as a result, that there'll be some 20-year-old bloke out there who goes, huh, well, I can't win and compete as a bloke. But if I weight train now for 5 years, get big, use all the advantages, the testosterone and the bone density and puberty and all the advantages men have on a physical standpoint on average, and then transition, I could make millions and millions of pounds out of this, or millions of dollars, or I could become famous and a celebrity and all these kind of things. I'm not saying that I think that's currently
Mm.
what is happening. The concern I have is I know for a fact there are people out there who absolutely, and I'm not saying these are normal people, these are people out there with problems and mental illnesses, but there are people out there who absolutely will do anything to make money, to become famous, to have their 5 minutes in the tabloids. So I worry that it opens the door for that kind of thing to occur, and I worry that it becomes a slippery slope then for,
Mm.
say, for example, situations where if the Olympics allow it for weightlifting, well, why? It's hard to then argue why the Olympics wouldn't allow it for track and field events, or it wouldn't allow it for boxing, for tennis, why that can't then also take place in football, why it can't take place in basketball, why it can't take place in all these other sports. And you'll end up with essentially
Mm.
women's sports being dominated by men who are good. Don't get me wrong, there has to be a talent there because women are phenomenal athletes, but men who weren't good enough to compete against the very, very, very best men on the planet. But because of the genetic advantages of being masculine there, or being male, sorry, and going through puberty as a bloke and all the testosterone that flooded their system for 10 years, 20 years, they then are able to kind of manipulate that to dominate women's sports. And I think that's unfair on female athletes who are very talented and had to put in a lot of work for, in some cases, decades to
Mhm.
earn that title.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think I completely agree. It takes away from the women who, like you say, have trained since the age of like 3 years old in a given sport and they've put their entire life, their soul into this for somebody to come through. Because the main issue I have with this is that they have expressed, Laurel has expressed, that she never had any intention of competing until they became trans, until they transitioned, I believe is the correct term. So that's my issue. It's like it's not even that they were competing when they were a man and then decided, oh, you know what, well, then they transitioned and then just continued competing in the sport they were anyway. They literally didn't compete in the sport and then transitioned. And now I'm not saying that they had that thought process that you were kind of concerned about, but they could have. Like we don't know. At which point, that's then not only is it taking away from the women who have put the effort in, who have tried their absolute hardest, who have dedicated their lives to this, but also in some sports that could be dangerous. Like, I mean, I've heard Joe Rogan, for example, talk hundreds of times about what if you were to put Brock Lesnar in a dress? What if Brock Lesnar transitioned and then competed with women's MMA? He's going to
I
kill
do want
people.
to just to
So, like
interject
at that
slightly
point,
because
it's a danger to life.
I know what Rogan's saying, but I do think that's slightly a straw man because things like the UFC have weight limits. There are very, very, very few women on the planet who weigh
Yeah, I
240
suppose.
pounds and are professional MMA fighters who would sign with the UFC. So Lesnar couldn't. In the same way, Lesnar and I
Yeah,
could
true.
never have a UFC fight. The size difference is too big. Just we wouldn't be able to meet in the middle in terms of weight. I'd need to gain about 70 pounds to
Yeah.
be near enough with him to be in the weight category. But yeah, there was a serious problem
Okay,
where you'd
fair enough then.
take some, so you can take some men who are slightly on a smaller scale, men who weigh 150, 160 pounds, they can transition, lose a bit of weight, and then they have theoretically a height
Mm.
advantage, a reach advantage, and testosterone, which affects your muscle density and muscle fibers and all these kind of things. Yeah, there are serious issues that could arise from,
Yeah.
for lack of a better phrase, men and women competing in sports together. Um, I don't necessarily have from a UFC standpoint, a significant problem with that if everybody goes into it knowing what's going on. So at the end, yeah, if I
Okay. It's if it's hidden.
sign up to the contract and then find out that my opponent used to be on a bunch of steroids, for example, to give them a huge strength advantage over me, I have an issue. But if I go into the fight and they say, look, this person used to have this advantage, the effects are still there, and I sign up for that fight, well, I know what I'm getting myself into. So I don't necessarily have an issue. I'm quite free market in that sense.
Okay.
The concern I'd have is you would end up in a position where you would essentially have, for example, the UFC being a predominantly, you have the male division, and then you'd have the female division that would be probably about 50% plus of trans fighters. And I don't have a problem with that necessarily,
Yeah.
except there are
Yeah.
phenomenal female fighters out there who absolutely deserve, who phenomenal, and I mean phenomenal athletes, and they absolutely deserve respect and they deserve the titles, and they've put in 15, 20 years. They've been training since they were 7 in some cases.
Yeah.
Now, these are phenomenal people who deserve all the acclaim that warranted from winning a UFC title. And I don't see how they would be able to do so competing against, for example, a man who's trained for 15 plus years in that martial art, had all the advantage of testosterone, and then transitioned. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that that's what I think all trans athletes are doing, but I think it opens the door for people to play
But
the
it's still
system.
that risk.
And we already see it in football quite often where we see people lie about their age to play at lower divisions so they can stand out more and get signed. Quite often, we had at school, there was a scandal where one of the lads on the team we played against was 18, but he was playing in the under 15s, 3-year age gap. And he was taking part, and he lied essentially to the school so that he could dominate school rugby to try and get a contract. So yeah, people play systems all the time. People exploit the rules. People are always looking for a way to cheat, particularly if there's huge sums of money involved. And I think this is going to open the door, particularly given that the rules around transgenderism are still up for debate. I.e., some people would argue that you haven't transitioned until you've had the surgery. Others would say, well, it's as soon as you say that you're a woman, you're now a woman. And I don't particularly have an opinion on either. But the point would be, well, that means you could theoretically have a footballer who gets kicked out of, say, Chelsea Football Club's academy, turn up to the women's team the next day, say, I'm a woman now, without having any of the surgery, not having any hormonal change, take part, dominate the sport. And I'm not saying they necessarily would, but let's say for the example that they do, dominate the sport, make all these millions,
It could.
and then as soon as they retire, go, I'm a man again now. And they've had to not, there's been no cost to them whatsoever. That's the concern I have, is it's the downstream consequences that concern me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you. It's like it's kind of in a grey area right now. Like you say, there's no set in stone rules right now that everybody can agree on, which is the kind of the worst part, or one of the worst parts about it. And I think, generally speaking, without obviously infringing on people's freedoms and rights, I think it's important to play it safer with the rules that we sort of follow. So I think, like, for example, like UFC, I think it's better to just say, I mean, say like you can't fight, like a woman can't fight a trans woman unless they obviously both consent to it, both agree to it. Like that has to be stated in the contract or whatever it is they sign. So I think it's better to play it safer like that now, so that we don't risk women's lives, careers, or just people's lives and careers, generally speaking, until we have some like clearly defined rules that says, right, okay, you have to have the full transition, the full surgery, top and bottom, to be like legally a woman. Maybe it's that, maybe it is just you say that you are a woman and you are whatever it is. I think until we have those clearly defined rules,
Yeah, I
it's
think it's
better to
also
play
one
it
of these
safe.
where we do need medical doctors involved in this conversation. Because I'll be the first to admit I don't know. I'm not an expert when it comes to hormones or anything like that. So I'm not aware if you have, for example, a man transition into a woman,
Yeah.
have top and bottom surgeries and all, everything like that. How much does that, and even because I know you can take hormone replacement therapy and things like this as well to reduce your testosterone and take your estrogen. I would be curious to know how much of the effect has already been done. Because I know that testosterone, when I was going through puberty, well, I grew about a foot and a half in the space of about 3 years, and I went from weighing about, I don't know, 80 pounds probably to weighing about 160, 170 pounds resting. So, do you know what I mean? I know that guys grow a lot from testosterone. My shoulders got a lot broader, my legs got a lot stronger and more powerful.
Yeah.
I don't know if my testosterone level drops suddenly, whether those effects would be taken away as much. Obviously, muscle can disappear and it can come back, and all these things. It can atrophy and it can go through hypertrophy. But at the same time, the width of my shoulders is decided by my bone structure, and that the width of my hips is bone structure. Those kind of things you can't
Yeah.
change once they're there. So I'm curious, or not to my
Particularly
knowledge at least.
change.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious, kind of, what a medical doctor would say about
Yeah.
this. Do you have an advantage 10 years later if you've been on testosterone suppressing hormones? Do you still have an advantage, roughly speaking? Because obviously it's an individual case by case basis. So yeah, essentially, it could be. But at the
Maybe
end
an
of the day, I'm
interesting
just glad
future
I don't have to
podcast
make the
guest.
decision.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Okay, cool. That
Yeah,
that
of
pretty much
course.
answers that
So
question.
this
Do
is
you
one
want
that
to ask
I've
your
been
next
sent
question
about
or move on
6
to your next
times while I've
topic?
been away. Quite literally, the same person has sent it almost like every week, saying, "When you come back, can you ask this?" And the question was that they heard that the true secret to winning any negotiation is to simply care less about the outcome than the other person. They want to know how it works, whether we agree that that's even true, and they just said, surely by wanting something that motivates you to negotiate harder and push harder for what you're after. So, Jordan, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so the fundamental of any negotiation is emotions. As I know, you're aware. Obviously, I'm aware. Most salespeople, good salespeople, will be aware of that. It's down to emotions and emotional connection, and first of all, selling somebody on an idea emotionally, and then allowing them to justify it with logic. So, on that basis, if you want the outcome less than the opponent, now it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you want it less. What it essentially means is you are less emotionally invested in the outcome. That's what that means. Now, usually that will take shape in the form of you want it less, because by definition, if you want something, you're going to be more emotionally invested. But it isn't always the case, and I'm sure there are a few examples where somebody still really wants it but are emotionally detached from the outcome. So if you are less emotionally attached to the outcome than your prospect, than the person you're negotiating with, than your friend, your colleague, whoever, then you are going to be able to negotiate from a logical standpoint. So you can make use of the techniques, of the facts, of everything in your arsenal. Your judgment isn't going to then be clouded by emotion, because a little emotion can be very powerful, because emotion after all is how you enter a strong state, for example. But too much emotion and you can go on tangents, you can fixate on a certain point. And I mean, look at the classic example of a disagreement in a debate, for example. Somebody gets too emotional about the situation, and it becomes less about the negotiation, less about the debate, less about finding the truth, and more about trying to prove the other person wrong, which is when name calling becomes a thing, or just name calling, trying to defame the other person. All of this sort of stuff then comes out. So going back to the original question, yes, I suppose if you want the result less, first of all, you will be less emotionally attached and therefore be able to be the more powerful negotiator, because the other person may then be involved and completely enveloped by their emotions, and therefore they won't be able to see more than 2 moves ahead. You actually sent me a video the other day talking about this. An angry person, an emotional person, can't see more than 2 or 3 moves ahead, whereas somebody who is calm, collected, and focused can see infinite moves ahead in theory. The other thing as well is, if you want the outcome less, you're not going to seem needy. And neediness always, or almost always, puts people off. Whether it's when you're talking to a woman, or you're talking to a prospect, or you're talking to friends, if you're needy, that is going to really kind of, yeah, it's going to put people off. It's going to make people not want to work with you, not date you. So you essentially kind of need to, the less you seem to care about the outcome, the more of an abundance mindset you have, obviously is the technical term, the more you know, well, even if I don't close this deal, even if I don't win this debate, even if I don't score with this girl, or guy, of course, it's okay, because there's going to be another one. The more of that mindset you have, the more people are going to be drawn to you, because generally speaking, people, whether they be prospects or partners or friends, they look for people who have options, but maybe then still choose to associate with them. So if you're that sort of person who isn't emotionally involved, who doesn't care as much about the outcome because they know they have options, that is the sort of person who is going to win a negotiation, who is going to have more of the people they want drawn to them, and overall, I believe, will have more success in life, obviously, with some
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
factors. So
As
what do
you were
you think
talking,
about
I was
that?
in
Do you
my
agree
head
with that?
going, when's he going to mention abundance? When's he going to talk about having other options? Brilliant, he's got there. Yeah, so literally everything you've said, I agree with. Just to use a concrete example, just for listeners and for Jack, so we can actually hear the answer to this question. Imagine, for example, you're going for a job interview and you're trying to negotiate with your potential employer about the salary and the bonus packages and all these kind of things you want. And they say, right, our line in the sand's 25,000. We really want to have you, but that's what we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you 25,000 pounds a year. There's no negotiating. If you really, really, really want this job and you've got no other jobs lined up and it's the only job you can get, you're in a position of weakness. All you can really do is say, all right, fine, because you have no backup. Whereas if you go into that job interview knowing you've already got 3 other job offers, each one, let's say one's offering you 26, one's offering you 27, and one's offering you 25, and they say, our line in the sand is 25, sorry. And you have the ability now to say, look, I do want this job. This is my preferred option of the other kind of offers I've got out there, but I do have other offers out there, and some of them are more financially viable for me. I'm not saying you have to match them or anything like that. I'm just saying I do have to take finance into account. It is, at the end of the day, we all need money to live. We all have bills to pay. So as much as I prefer working here than elsewhere, I'm in a situation in my life where finance does matter to me. So if there's no wiggle room in the 25,000 whatsoever, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave and go elsewhere. That puts you in a much stronger position of power, because now they're in a situation where it's, oh shit, we're losing this person. And if you've got a strong CV and you did really well and they really want you, and they want you, you've now flipped on them. So now, because they're really keen on this outcome, which is hiring you, they're more likely to be able to negotiate with you. I think this is where most people go wrong, even when they already have a job and asking for a pay rise, is they're saying, I'd really like a pay rise, please. And their employer goes, I'd really like to not give you a pay rise. And you go, okay. Whereas what you should be doing, whereas the way you should be doing it is to go
because
in,
you have
say, 6
nothing
months
else.
early or 3 months early and go, look,
Go on.
I'm looking to get a pay rise in 3 to 6 months. Say this to your boss. What kind of things would I need to be doing? What kind of things do I need to achieve in this time frame for that to become a possibility, or more realistic possibility? They'll give you a list of, you need to improve on this and this and this, or take on these extra responsibilities. Do that, smash it out the park, and then you're in a strong situation. As well as that, make sure your CV is awesome, send it out, get another job offer that's offering you more money. And then when you sit down in 6 months and say, hey boss, sorry, have you got a minute to talk? And you sit down with them, you can say, we spoke a few months ago about me potentially getting a pay rise. Well, you told me to do A, B, C, D. I feel I've succeeded in doing A, B, C, D, or improved upon A, and I've implemented B now, etc. Just so you know, I also have an offer from this firm as well. And it's one of those where they have offered me more money, they've offered me the kind of money I'm looking for. So I'd really like to be loyal and stay. But again, at the end of the day, we all know how this works. This is business. Money is a factor here. So is there a way? And there's a subtlety of doing this, and it depends on the person you're negotiating with and personality types, etc. I'm not saying you go in and go, ha, I have a job offer, so pay me more, and make them feel like you've bent them over a
Yeah.
barrel. Because if an employee tried to do that to me, I'd say, fair enough, good luck, I wish you the best, I'll give you an amazing reference, bye. But equally, if you go in with, please can I have a pay rise,
Yeah.
and there's no kind of repercussion, there's no bite to them saying no,
Nobody's going to give you a pay
people will
rise.
just say no. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's something like a lesson that you can take from that and apply to basically anything. I mean, like if you're in university, for example, you can obviously, if you need an extension on a deadline, for example, it could be something along those lines. I don't know what exactly you would bite with, because it's not like you can say I'm going to go to a different university, but but you can use these kind of negotiation tactics in basically every part of your life. It's just about having options. It's about knowing that you have the worth, that if you need to walk away, you can. If you need to go elsewhere, you can. Cool. Okay, I'll move on to my next question then, and this is kind of an interesting one that I know I've struggled with in the past. I know you've struggled with in the past, and I would assume most people have. And that is, how can you, me, we stop ourselves
Is there a
acting
specific
on
situation you
impulse?
have in mind, or
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, for example, if you're an impulsive shopper or an impulsive buyer, impulsive spender, whatever you want to call it, nowadays it's easier than ever to kind of just go on Amazon, on your phone and literally just open up your phone. Oh, I kind of fancy buying X, Y, or Z. I can
Mhm.
just go on, open my phone and buy it and order it straight to my door for the next day. So, how in that situation, or a similar situation, say to a porn addiction, if I don't know if you've got a porn addiction, if you're kind of impulsively watching porn, it's so easy to just open up your phone, open up Pornhub or one of the millions of other sites and just find what you're looking for. So, how do you recommend people contend with those
Slow
impulses
everything down.
and potentially
And I
overcome
mean
them if
that
they
both
want to?
slow yourself down so that you physically take longer doing certain things, um, just because that gives you more time to think and talk yourself out of it, and put barriers in the way of the behavior that you are trying to prevent yourself doing. So, say for example, it was porn addiction. Don't take your phone or a laptop into the bedroom with you.
Mm,
That could be one way. Another way could be installing,
mhm,
you know the technical side of this more than I do, but installing something on your computer that doesn't allow you to go to those sites. Like when we were at school, they had blockers, and it's like this website's blocked. Install things like that.
yeah,
For online shopping, I'd
yeah,
get rid of the apps, delete them off your phone, things like that. So just everything that makes it an extra 5 seconds worth of effort
mhm,
to act on that impulse bit by bit means if it's taken you 5 minutes to do
mhm,
it, it's not an impulse. That was a choice at that point. An impulse is something that's a split decision. So if you, for say, use
yeah,
your the shopping
sure,
addiction or the
yeah,
porn addiction or whatever it is, and you just impulsively, instinctively do it. Well, if you make it so that you don't have access to them on your phone, you have to actually go and get your laptop from the other room, bring it in. You have to open it up, go onto the computer, log in, all that stuff. You then have to deactivate the firewall or whatever it is, and then you can do it. There's so many points there where you can kind of catch up with your impulse and stop yourself. It's the same as like the easiest. We all know this. Anyone who's ever kind of tried to have a diet and
mm,
cut certain foods out of their diet, the best way is to not have that food in the house. It's just easier. It is so much easier for me to say I don't want to eat any crisps this week, just to
mm,
not have crisps in the house, than it is to go, well, I'm still going to buy crisps, but I'm not going to eat them. Because then every time you open the cupboard and you see them, there's that impulse to just go grab them. So that's how I do it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, absolutely. And I think to kind of really drive home the point you made as well is like with the crisps example, for example, if you if you buy the crisps, you've essentially made the first step towards eating them. So once you've made the first step towards anything, as I know you're aware, you then find the second, third, and subsequent steps that much easier to make. So if you think about buying the thing or having the app on your phone as the first step towards doing it, then you kind of understand, well, actually, if I've taken the first step, it's going to be easier when I have that impulse. So, like you said, delete the apps, put a blocker on your phone, don't buy the foods that you're not trying to eat, etc. And you haven't made that first step consciously, and therefore it'll be much easier to resist that. The other thing that I would kind of add to that is notice what your triggers are. So, for example, if every time you go in the bathroom you feel like watching porn, then notice that, recognize that trigger, and then essentially make it increasingly difficult for yourself in that context with that trigger to act on that impulse. So again, maybe it's you, I don't know, you get into bed at night and you just sit scrolling through Amazon and buy a load of crap you don't need. Make a point, make it into a game almost. Every time you get into bed, you have 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute to check your phone, and then that is it. You have to go to sleep. Even have a timer on your phone. So then when that timer goes off, you know, right, okay, I can't do anything else on my phone. So then it's not, okay, well, now I can sit on my phone for an hour and I can respond to my messages and then scroll through Amazon and buy shit I don't need for the next 2 hours. It becomes, okay, well, I've responded to my messages, now my 5 minutes are up. I don't have the time to go on Amazon. I don't have the time to spend any money. Or if you're in the bathroom, right, okay, I have 2 minutes to get in and out of the bathroom to do what I need to do. So then you just don't have the time. Like, you wouldn't take your phone into the bathroom, or like Harry said, obviously lock your phone in a desk or something if you're going to the bathroom, because then even if you feel the urge, you're just going to be sitting there on the toilet feeling the urge. You can't do anything about it. So that's what I
Yeah,
would kind of
absolutely. I
say.
mean,
Notice your
triggering is a
triggers
huge
and
part of
put
this, so
those
that's a really
precautions in
good point to
place.
make. Yeah, it's just identifying what are the times of day, what are the kind of activities, what happens when you feel any of those kind of urges you're trying to avoid. Identifying what they are. You may not get it right the first time or the first few times, but it's kind of irrelevant. You just focus on the process rather than the results, and you will just over time get
Yeah.
better. It's the same as like if you're trying to stop drinking. Well, step one of that: stop going with your mates to the pub. Stop buying beer on a Friday night and bring them home with you. If there's no alcohol in the house and you don't go to places with alcohol, it's a hell of a lot easier to not drink. And then after you've
Yeah.
got the habit of not drinking, then you can actually go back to the pub and just say, "Oh, let's have a soda, or let's have a water, or whatever it might be, lime cordial."
Yeah.
Um, like there's ways around it, and it's not a case of
Yeah.
you're never allowed to have your phone in your
Yeah.
bedroom ever again. It's just a case of right. There's currently a pattern of behavior. I need to interrupt that pattern, create a new pattern of behavior, a new habit. And now that I have that new habit in place, I can reintroduce old behaviors because the pattern's been interrupted, so it won't lead to the undesired behavior, the undesired outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely agree. One thing that I personally found very, very powerful for me is actually having a rule where I don't choose my phone when I'm in bed. So before I go to sleep, if I need to send anybody some last messages or I need to check a notification, or I say need, I use the term need loosely. But like, I would make sure I do that before getting into bed, before getting under the covers, and obviously then sleeping. So I wouldn't sit there then scrolling on my phone. Like, TikTok was an awful one for me. I wouldn't then do that. If I wanted to watch TikTok, I had to stand there like a gimp, looking at my phone next to the bed, and nobody wants to do that. And after a while, I just kind of grew out of wanting to watch TikTok. Really, like, I hardly do it now. And it also, if you've got a porn addiction, it could obviously help with that, especially if you're doing it in bed. If you're impulse shopping, impulse buying, again, help with that. And like Harry said, just this is all a temporary thing. It's 1, maybe 2 months to build the habit. Once you've built the habit, you can. I mean, it may take longer, it may take less time. It depends for people. But I believe that the rough figure is like 28 days to build a habit, is what I've heard. So, like, if you can just sacrifice using your phone in bed or going to the pub for a month, especially like during lockdown, it must have been easier than ever, and it still kind of is easier than ever to do. So, if you can do that, make that sacrifice for 1 month, maybe two, then you're going to set yourself up for the rest of your life of being able to go to the pub and not drink, or not drink excessively, and get into bed and not spend £100 a night on Amazon, or not watch porn every night and wank off every night. So it's kind of, a couple of months of sacrifice at most for a
Anything else you'd add
lifetime
to
of
that point,
benefits,
or
essentially.
all right? So this
Do
last
you want to move
question
on
I've
to your
been
next question?
sat on for a while,
No,
ever
that's it for me.
since. In fact, it was our last podcast that you and I did together, and we've both been very critical about university and about how we almost advise people not to go. If we had to state the positives
Oh God.
of university and we had to make an argument in favour of going to university, what would that argument be? So I'll let you go first, mate.
Okay. Okay, so my arguments for not going to me telling people that not to go to university is actually kind of hypocritical, because obviously I do go to university. So yeah, but there are obviously benefits to going to university. So the big benefit, the big pull factor, me having gone and as I am going to university, even though I don't recommend people do for most courses in most situations, I think the biggest benefit by far is the networking opportunity, because depending on what university you go to, you essentially have access to thousands of future leaders of industry. If you can make connections now when these people haven't made a name for themselves, they don't have experience, they don't have a reputation, even if it's just on like a acquaintance basis, further down the line, some of these people could be leading healthcare specialists, they could be leading, obviously, dentists, they could be leading travel agents, estate agents, anything, bankers, and all of these further down the line, they can benefit you in countless ways. Obviously, getting loans, healthcare, finding your next house, finding property, finding your next holiday, all of these different massive benefits. So you have access to all of this potential talent and this future talent pool, which is massively powerful. And secondly, is especially at De Montfort, the university I go to, but equally at tons and tons of universities, potentially all of them, there are hundreds of opportunities for students to develop themselves and also obviously meet other people who are looking to develop themselves. One great example of this is at De Montfort, they do something called an enterprise placement year. And this is essentially a year in industry where you run your own business. And I've done this, and for me, it's been absolutely fantastic because it's given me a year to focus entirely on my business without having to worry about my degree, without having to worry about getting a job, because obviously I've got my student loan. And it's just an unparalleled opportunity. And through that, I've met hundreds of people that I wouldn't have met otherwise, especially because I come from a small village. So I see the same 20 people all day, every day. Whereas now going to university, it almost gives you a reason, an excuse to go out of your comfort zone, move to a city you've never been to, and just forces you to socialize and mingle with people that you wouldn't have met otherwise, essentially. So that is kind of the big benefit to university. Is it worth the 30, 40 grand you have to spend in tuition fees? Probably not. You can pay less than that and go to networking events. But if you are going to university to do a degree anyway in obviously like nursing, dentistry, whatever it might be, like some of the STEM subjects. Architecture is a good one. So if you're going anyway, make use of that networking opportunity because it's definitely the biggest pull factor. And if you really don't mind paying back 30, 40 grand student loan for the networking opportunity, then by all means go for it.
I think you've touched on one of the points I'd
But
make,
yeah,
which
that's
is
kind of the biggest benefit for me. What would you
as
say?
a student at university, particularly if you're away from home, you are absolutely socially allowed to party, to drink, to socialize, to kind of be a reckless teenager, young adult. And there can be incredible benefits to that. You get to socialize, you get
Yeah,
to meet new people from different parts of the country, maybe new parts of the world. You get to experience new things. You get to try out different sports and different societies and try all these different things.
yeah,
You get to, depends on the subject you do, but sometimes you might be exposed to interesting ideas. I don't think the lecturers play any part in that personally, from my experience. But you do, for example, if you could meet somebody who's doing a politics course, for example, and they can tell you about the ideas of John Locke, or you can meet an economist who talks about Friedman versus Nash, or you can hear about all these different ideas, and that is brilliant. And that melting pot is fantastic. It also gives you an opportunity to get away from all your existing habits and environment and create new patterns, new behaviors. I know lots of people who went to university who had never been into working out before, and they got into university and then they discovered the gym, and it was fantastic for them. It's something they've continued doing there for the next kind of 5 years since we've left. Or other people who all sorts of things that they never would have experienced and they never had experienced at home. By going to university, meeting different people, they got to experience all these different things. There's huge benefits to the social side of that. You also have the advantage that at the end of the day, near enough every employer looks for degrees these days. There are certain exceptions, but most employers want you to have a degree. So there's the obvious advantage of if you have a degree,
yeah,
your job opportunities increase. That is a big advantage. If you're looking to go into entrepreneurship, maybe that's not as advantageous for you, but maybe as a fallback, it might be useful. In terms of the cost that you brought up, the 27,000, 30,000, 40,000, whatever it could be to get your qualifications, I personally, my advice would be forget about it. Don't worry, because you don't pay it back until you're earning a certain percentage per year. When you do pay it back, you're paying back a very minuscule amount. The debt can get written off, and there's lots of kind of ways to avoid it, i.e., if you leave the country, if you move abroad, if you are under the tax threshold, etc. So there are kind of, don't worry about the debt. If you've got a little bit of free time and or some understanding of the UK tax system, you can not worry about that. And I want to be clear, that's not financial advice, and I'm not encouraging you to not pay your taxes. What I'm saying is don't let that be a factor in your decision. I think university is a fantastic thing. I think it's a great thing, and I actually would recommend to a significant number of people that they go. The issue I have with university is there's the implicit implication that it served the same purpose that it did 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, and that was it educated. And I don't believe that to be the case. I went to a few different universities. I would argue all of them. There's one
yeah,
exception, actually, and we can talk off air about it because I don't wish to publicly critique universities or slander or slate them, nor be libelous or whatever the fucking term is. But there was one university I went to that did encourage you to think for yourself and did encourage you to be a critical thinker and use analysis and get different sources and work out your own opinion. However, most of them were, I am the professor, here is my opinion. This is also the opinion of all the faculty. In your essay, write this opinion down. And if you don't write down that opinion, we're not going to grade you well, regardless of how great the work might be, even if you disprove our theory in the process of your essay. So be aware that going to university doesn't mean you have any understanding of the topic. In most cases, Obviously, if you're a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, that might be slightly different. But getting a degree in history doesn't mean that you're necessarily, you know everything about history. I think you've been taught a certain biased side of history, and the quality of the university will dictate this and change drastically. But go to university, get your qualification. Don't think it means anything other than it's a piece of paper to get your foot in
Yeah.
the door, and spend that time leveling up, working on yourself, improving, and enjoying the fact that you could potentially be in a situation where the government is giving you enough money to live on. So for 3 years, you can just drink and party and socialize and network and meet people and have fun. Because the one thing people, I think,
Yeah.
aren't told, particularly men, is once you leave
Yeah.
university, you're no longer, for example, in terms of dating, you're no longer competing with the lads at uni. You're now competing with every man in society. And the truth of the matter is, if you're a 21-year-old lad, chances are you're pretty low down the pecking order, mate.
Mm.
So it is also from a dating standpoint and just a relationship building, friendship building, network building standpoint. You're all kind of at
Yeah.
the same level. You're all students, so you all have the kind of the ability to be on equal footing and meet people, even though in a way that's more difficult once you join the, for lack of a better phrase, the adult world or the working world.
Mm. Yeah, and to kind of leeway on your point, it's university can act as a very nice bridge between childhood and adulthood because obviously
Mm-hmm.
initially you're in school, you get a set routine that you're given, you get told what to do, sort of what to think, I would argue to a degree, and then university, like you say, is for most people, in most cases, an opportunity for you to try new things, to experience what you like, what you don't like, form your own opinions on things. So yeah, don't look at university as an educational platform or medium. Look at it as an opportunity to develop yourself and make the most of the opportunities that are available. So one big thing that I would recommend for anybody going to university is in usually the first week, maybe the first couple of weeks of university, they have a freshers fair at most universities, and it's basically an opportunity to sign up to any sort of society that you want and try them out. Go to a session, see what you think. Do you like it? Don't you like it? And then see how you kind of feel moving forward. I would actually recommend signing up to as many of those as possible for that first taster session. Try it out, and ultimately, if you don't like it, then don't do it. But you might discover a massive passion in your life, even if you choose then not to follow through with the society. You can then, maybe you find a passion in rugby, so you don't want to follow through in that society, but you could then sign up with your sports team in your city, for example. So it's kind of all about finding who you are outside of the setting of school or the setting of living with your parents, basically. And then you have that nice transition, that nice buffer period as such, where you can develop yourself, learn the skills that you actually need for life, so that when you then leave university, you're prepared
Yeah,
for
that
adulthood
financial
rather
point's a
than
really good
just
one as well, to be
what are
fair,
taxes?
which
I
is you
didn't know I
also
had to pay
learn
this,
to
like kind
budget.
of situation.
You also learn about how expensive cheese is, for example, which is the, I don't know if it's still a meme, but when I was at uni, that was the meme that everybody
Oh
posted on
God, yeah,
Facebook, which was like things you learn as an adult, like
yeah,
things you learn as a
it's
uni
mad.
student was like cheese is really expensive. Everybody's on cocaine, and 9 a.m. nobody attends, and it's just one of those things. It's like, oh, okay, fair enough. But yeah, it's getting used to budget, getting used to paying bills. The fact you have to sign
Yeah,
contracts, like to be a tenant and
yeah.
rental
I
agreements,
mean,
all
it's
these
all
kind of
true.
things. All of that is useful, and it is all good kind of preparation in
Yeah,
a pseudo safety netted environment. So there are benefits to university, absolutely.
yes,
My issue is somebody who goes, well, I have a degree, therefore. And it's like, great, you have a degree. That means you jumped through the
yes,
hoops necessary to get the degree. Shut the fuck up. You're an idiot. That doesn't make you special. To be polite.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I agree. That's putting it politely. I've heard you say way worse. Okay, cool then. I will move on to my last question then, and this is specifically around dating and women's psychology primarily. So, simple question. What is hypergamy? Does it really exist? And I know that there is kind of a subset of men that really hate and resent women for hypergamy. So, should we embrace it
Okay, so
instead? Are these
hypergamy,
men
and
right
I'm
to
going to be
hate women for
relatively
hypergamy?
simplistic in my
But
definition
let's
here,
start with the first
but
question. What
roughly
is
speaking,
hypergamy?
hypergamy is the process in which women will date across and up social hierarchies. They don't date down hierarchies.
Hmm.
Very simply put, that's what it is.
Hmm. Okay.
Yes, it exists.
So, does it
There are
exist, or
certain
is it a
exceptions
myth
and
invented
caveats,
by
but yes, it
red pill
exists.
thinkers?
Because from an evolutionary standpoint, you serve
Hmm.
no benefit,
Okay, why
or a
does it
woman would
exist
serve no
then?
benefit from dating a man who didn't provide a social benefit to herself and to the next generation. So if you, for example, have two options, you could date
Mm,
option A, someone who looks, and
yeah.
let's say we're caveman era. You could date somebody who's for example, option A looks like Dwayne Johnson, built, strong, powerful, charismatic, wealth. Everybody loves him. Everybody respects him. He's the leader. When he says, right, let's go
Mm,
hunt, everybody follows. Nobody hates him. Nobody wants to kill him or harm him. If you have children with that guy, then A, you have all those genetics potentially in your offspring. But B, you gain all the social clout that he had. So your child will grow up protected because that's Dwayne Johnson's son. I like Dwayne, so I'll make sure I'll look after his son like he's my nephew or whatever. You have that kind of thing in communities quite often. You'll have all the networking opportunities that come with it because he's Dwayne Johnson's son. Dwayne Johnson
yeah.
gets the first choice of the food. His son is going to be eaten. He's going to have shelter, protection, etc. If option B is the guy who is small, weak, vindictive,
Mm,
spiteful, no sense of humor, and everybody hates, then not only can he not provide any of those things, but people actively dislike him and want to cause him harm. So he's the worst person to have offspring with because that's going to carry on to the next generation as well, which is, hey, you're so and so's son, aren't you? Fuck off. Your
yeah.
dad was a dick, you're a dick. So I'm simplifying this, obviously, but roughly speaking, that's the reason for it, which
Mm,
is it's a
yeah.
better evolutionary survival tactic to pick the more um,
But
to pick those men who are deemed more socially acceptable and more socially revered.
mm,
Mm.
okay. So with women, obviously this is how it's working. Does that mean then that every woman or most women are likely to go through a cycle of
Mm.
upgrading? So let's say they have a fairly socially acceptable, attractive man. Let's say they're on the same level as the woman socially. Does that mean that if the Dwayne Johnson types were to come and show interest to this woman,
No, it doesn't
most, if
necessarily
not
mean that.
all,
Obviously,
would
there'll be
then
some women who
leave the
do,
current
but as a
relationship and
general rule of
upgrade,
thumb,
so to say?
no, that doesn't occur. And it's because we're not, when we talk about things like evolutionary practices, it's really easy to be myopic and just go, well, if this is the case, then that means this must be the case.
Mm,
There's multiple variables, and you have to look at things from this is life, not a simulation. So there's 100 million variables that go into every decision that's made.
yeah,
The other variable would be, well, say, for example, she did that. Well, she has a reputation now
yeah.
for being that kind of person, for the phrase we use is gold digger. That damages her reputation in the future, which might make her less desirable and might impact her kids. And then there'll be other
Which lowers
factors
her.
as well that affect this. Like there are like loyalty is a thing, emotional
Uh,
connection is a thing. We don't date just logically. There's also obviously emotional attachment. There's trust. There's sense of humor. There's compatibility. There's chemistry. There's shared values. All these things also factor in. But there will be a percentage of women who, yeah, will just jump to the best possible option. And that's not unique to women, by the way. It's just men aren't as successful at doing it. Yeah.
Just generally, yeah. Yeah, pretty much. And does the concept of hypergamy apply to men as well? As in,
Yeah,
do
well,
men
you
tend to
can't
date
have both
equal or
men and
above?
women
Or
dating
I've
above
seen somewhere
because
that men tend to date
that
a
is
little bit
quite
above or a
literally
little bit below.
counterintuitive. It's contradictory. So, roughly speaking, a woman will, roughly speaking, and I am generalizing, but a woman will only find a man attractive if he is of her
Yes,
social
true, yeah.
level or above. Now, there is one key exception to that and a few other smaller exceptions. The key exception is indicators of potential future hierarchical growth. Which basically means like the starving artist idea, which is, yeah, now he's a loser and he's a starving artist and he's a failure. But he's
Yeah.
also really charming and really confident and really ambitious and talented. So I'm making a bet that in 10 years he will be a super success. He'll be the next Picasso, and I'm hitching my horse to this wagon. Or would you hitch the wagon to the horse? Either way, it's relevant. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But regardless, so there are certainly exceptions. The point I would make is men tend to be slightly more simplistic. Men tend to. Women are the selectors. We talked about this with Ellie Bessie in her podcast. Women, roughly speaking, are the ones who control relationships and sex because they're the ones who say yes. Men, roughly speaking, are kind of usually just up for it regardless. So because women have the positioning of the selector, it's up to men to impress women. Women, roughly speaking, impress men by what they look like, roughly speaking. There are, of course, exceptions, and the higher status you become for either gender, obviously those things start mattering more because when you get to the top echelon, let's say, for example, actually Dwayne Johnson, if we were to assume he can date near enough any woman he wanted, all that means he has the choice of 100,000 very attractive women. So other variables become more important to that point.
Okay, yeah. So it's when you have so many options that then these other factors do become important. Okay, cool. That makes sense. And have you heard about any these
Mm-hmm.
group of men? I believe they're called incels, but I might have used that term wrong. These group of men that actively hate or resent women for the concept of hypergamy, among other things. Do you feel that that is potentially the right way to go, or do you feel that they are just, well, being incels
I
and
think
we
that
should
anybody
instead
who
embrace or just accept
resents
that hypergamy is a
women
thing,
for
it's not
wanting to
women's
date the
fault?
best
What do you
possible
think?
partner they can find is a fucking moron and an insecure little bitch. The only reason you would be upset at the notion that women want to date high status men is if it makes you feel like if it makes you insecure because you're not high status. Well, the correct response to that is to go and work on yourself and improve and become a better man, become a better husband, a better father, become a better businessman, a better member of your community, become funnier, more charismatic, become more generous. Work on yourself, improve yourself. Don't fucking go, well, women only want to date strong men who are fit and athletic and smell nice and who are kind. I want to sit here in my mom's basement without a job and no money, having not showered for 3 weeks with a massive beard that smells and has food in it from 2 weeks ago, and I'm a dickhead and I'm mean to everybody. Women should want me for me. No, fuck you. Stop making excuses. Like, no. Roughly speaking, my logic is anyone who tries to control other people's options of selection
Yeah,
is insecure because
yeah,
they feel that that's going to leave them left out.
yeah, yeah. So do Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was going to say, like, so is it fair to say then that you think any man or any person who does hate or resent women for that are essentially
Yes.
just hiding
I
their
will make the caveat
insecurities
that in
or trying
individual
to smother their
circumstances,
insecurities in it being
there
somebody
might
else's
be
fault when in
situations
reality
where you
it's
can
just
go,
their
no,
fault?
she is a bitch. And fair enough. In an individual circumstance, you are allowed to have individual feelings towards an individual person. That's fair enough in this case. But to be one of these guys who is constantly rejected by women and respond to that with women are the problem, you just don't understand anything. Because at the end of the day, you're the variable in common. If you've been rejected by 300 women in a row, well, the women are all different.
No,
different personalities, different upbringings. They certainly all look different. They're not all going to be identical 300ths or whatever the fucking term is. So they're different people. But you're the same person. So you're the variable in common, which means you're the one creating the negative outcome, the rejection. And I know that's not nice to hear. So if that offends you, well, sorry, but deal with it. Buy a copy of, buy any of the books out there that can help you on this. I most personally would recommend Jordan Peterson's book at the moment. And you could see the smirk. I wasn't plugging my own book. Wasn't going to. No. I'd recommend Jordan Peterson's 2 books. 12 Rules for Life and Antidote to Chaos and Beyond Order.
Oh, you always did. I was like,
I'd recommend them really strongly. And listen to podcasts like this. And there's lots of other good podcasts out. There's lots of great books out there. There's my book coming soon. But the point I'd make is just stop it. You're making your life worse off by resenting other people, when in reality you should just be taking ownership of what you can change and not be expecting other people to do things for you. Take control of what you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Take control of your life, take control of yourself, and opportunities will come to you. Absolutely. Okay, I think that's a really strong message to kind of end on then today. Cool. Good, great to have you back, Harry. I've absolutely been, it's fantastic chatting with you. Obviously, once again, it's been a while, but I'm glad you're back.
So what I'd say to that
is, I'm looking forward to more episodes with you.
Brilliant questions.
Some fantastic
questions
today, and I've really enjoyed answering them with you.
To answer them or anything like that, drop them down in the comments on YouTube or go into the description. You'll find our social medias and DM them us personally. Let us know what questions you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Check out the description. All of the information for our social media, our email address, everything will be there. Click that link.
Until next time.
Send us your questions. Or if you want to appear as a guest, send us a message if you have something interesting to talk about, and we'll be in touch. Until next time.